They
I am
say
telling
every
you for the
neighborhood
last
has that
time,
guy.
this gate
You know the
must
one,
remain
the
closed.
human
This is my
version of a
land.
speed
I'll do
bump,
what I
except
want.
you
You
can't
have
just
no
drive over
jurisdiction
him
here.
and keep going. Sometimes I wonder if all the stress in American suburbs isn't from bills or work or traffic, but from waking up every day knowing you live within walking distance of someone like Rick Halverson. You ever have a Rick on your block? Trust me, if you do, you know it. And if you don't, man, count your blessings seriously. So, let me just get this out of the way. In our neighborhood, Rick wasn't just an annoying guy who quoted HOA rules at block parties. He was dangerous in a way you don't expect from a guy with a paunch and a clipboard. And nobody elected him. Nobody wanted him. He just showed up one day in this bright orange vest like he was headed for a construction site he owned, and he decided he was going to be the law around here. Yeah, that's right. He bought himself a reflective vest off the internet, got a clipboard from the local office supply store, and suddenly he was walking up and down our street every morning. Like he was on patrol, only instead of catching criminals, he was out there catching weeds. Or maybe the terror of an overgrown mailbox. Always with his phone out, too. Recording, taking photos, muttering notes to himself like he was collecting evidence for a trial only he'd ever attend. And, of course, every neighborhood has a guy like Rick, but it just so happened that he picked the wrong street to play sheriff. Or more specifically, the wrong front porch, my grandfather's. Let me tell you, the day Rick crossed my grandfather, he made a mistake so big, there was no going back. And the thing is, I was right there, I saw all of it happen. So, I want you to listen, really listen, and tell me when it's over if you think karma ever gets the address wrong. It was way too early for anything dramatic. I'm talking about that weird hour before sunrise when it's still gray outside. The birds aren't even up yet, and the world just feels paused. I was half asleep in the kitchen, trying to coax some life into my body with a bowl of cereal, when I heard it, that slow, groaning creak from the backyard. You know that sound old wood makes when it's forced to do something it's too tired for? That was our fence. Out on the porch, my grandfather was doing his morning thing. Rocking slow in his chair, this old army jacket pulled tight around him, steam rising from his coffee mug. Without even turning his head, he just said, "There he goes again." Didn't have to say the name. I looked out, and sure enough, there's Rick hauling himself over our fence like he thinks he's James Bond, but really, he's just a middle-aged guy who's bad at climbing things. His boots scraping, phone out, zooming in on my grandfather's tomato plants. These perfect, bright red tomatoes growing in neat little rows. You'd think he was about to catch El Chapo back there, but no, just tomatoes. Apparently, Rick had decided that growing tomatoes was a violation of community standards. Not kidding. Tomatoes. The threat to suburbia. Let that sit for a second. My grandfather, 75, a veteran, growing food in his own backyard. Suddenly public enemy number one. I felt that anger bubble up, the kind that makes you want to swing first and explain later. I was halfway to the door before I knew it. But then my grandfather, who's never in a rush, never raises his voice. He just holds up a finger like, "Hold on." And in this quiet, kind of tired way, he says, "No. Patience." Then, almost like he's got some inside joke I'm nodding on, he goes, "Let a fool show himself long enough, and he'll write his own ending." And he just goes back to his coffee. That was him. Always steady. Never let anyone else set the tempo. Rick, meanwhile, was all nervous energy and self-importance. This wasn't the first time, either. For weeks, Rick had been circling our property, snooping near the shed, peeking through the slats in the fence, acting like he expected to find. What exactly? Contraband rakes? An illegal hose? Once I saw him rattling the shed door like maybe my grandfather was hiding a meth lab in there. All he found was a bag of fertilizer and some old boots. Every time my grandfather would catch him, Rick would flash this fake, stretched-out smile and say, "Just doing my job for the HOA." Like the HOA was the CIA, and he was about to be promoted to special agent. Thing is, Rick didn't actually have a job. He wasn't on the HOA board, never had been. My grandfather had already filed complaints, taken pictures, written dates and times, did the whole paperwork dance with the HOA president, Marilyn Brooks. She always gave the same answer: pearls, big glasses, rehearsed smile. Oh, Rick's just passionate about the community. Passionate? That's one way to say it. Another way is power hungry. Obsessed. The HOA always hid behind technicalities. Oh, Rick is just helping out informally, not really enforcing anything. Which, if you ask me, is legal speak for please don't sue us if this gets weird. And believe me, it was about to get weird. Grandpa even called the sheriff. But unless you actually catch the guy in the act and want to press charges, it's just your word against his. Nothing we can do, sir. Sorry, the officer said. That was the last time my grandfather complained. After that, he started planning. For 3 days, he lived in the garage. Door cracked open, radio playing those old country songs, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams. Every so often, he'd call me in, hand me a wrench, or ask me to Google something about electrical wiring. By the 4th morning, I noticed something new about our iron gate. Not obvious, just a little different. A bright yellow sign, warning, electrified gate, no trespassing. Some subtle wiring, low voltage, nothing dangerous, all legal, all marked. He didn't cut corners. Never did. And right on schedule before sunrise, there's Rick, climbing again, phone out, ready for his next violation photo shoot. Grandpa, meanwhile, just rocking, sipping coffee, barely blinking. I'm inside, peeking through the blinds, heart pounding like it's prom night, and I'm waiting for a date that's never coming. Rick reaches for the gate with his gloved hand. There's a little snap, the kind of zap that doesn't hurt you, but definitely wakes you up. Rick yelps, stumbles, arms flapping, and lands flat on his back, dignity leaking out of him faster than sweat. Grandpa doesn't even crack a smile, just rocks a little deeper and says, "That's the sound of justice." By noon, everyone on the block had heard about it. You'd think someone had staged a circus act. People whispering, pretending not to laugh, neighbors finding reasons to check their mail twice. Rick, naturally, started telling everyone my grandfather had set up illegal traps, that he was a menace. But the problem for Rick was everyone already knew him. They'd seen him measuring grass, photographing bikes, peeking through windows. Rick wasn't protecting the community. He was feeding his own need for control. And that's what made me nervous. Guys like Rick don't quit when they lose. They escalate. Now look, let me pause here for a second, because here's where a lot of people get confused and, frankly, where guys like Rick thrive. An HOA is not the Supreme Court. They don't have unlimited power, no matter how loud someone yells community standards. HOA authority? It's boring and narrow by design. Real enforcement comes through letters, meetings, due process, not through someone hopping fences before sunrise with a GoPro. Legally, the second Rick crossed that fence, he was trespassing. End of story. HOA rules don't override state law. Private property is still private property, even if there's a book of neighborhood rules as thick as a phone book. Real inspections? They come with notice and permission, not by ambush. And here's where things get messy. People like Rick aren't motivated by clean driveways. They're motivated by power, even if it's just the feeling of power. And once the rest of us get used to the small oversteps, nobody stops
this gate must
them. They
remain
test
closed.
boundaries.
This is my
we get
land.
tired.
I'll do
they
what
escalate.
I want. You have no
That's why you don't
jurisdiction
confront
here.
guys like this by yelling. That's what they want, chaos, attention. Instead, you out-document them. You stay calmer than they ever could. You don't break the system. You use it. But Rick? He didn't get that memo. After the gate incident, any normal person would have disappeared for a while, nursed the ego, maybe questioned their life. Not Rick. He doubled down. For 2 days, he circled the block in his dented silver pickup, slow as a funeral march. Sometimes he'd park across the street, staring at our house. Other times, he'd drive by, filming with his phone, muttering into it like he was recording evidence for a Netflix series that nobody would ever watch. My grandfather? Same spot, same coffee, same calm. Didn't even look up. By the 3rd night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt tight, heavy, like the street itself was waiting for something to snap. Then, just past midnight, I heard it, the soft metallic scrape, cautious, careful, right outside. I peeked out and saw Rick in a hoodie, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. Crouched by the gate, lips moving, probably practicing whatever excuse he was going to give later. He wasn't inspecting anymore. He was breaking in. Before I could even say a word, Grandpa, still on the porch, lit up his phone screen. His voice was low, almost gentle. "Watch this, kid." He didn't get up, didn't yell. Just lifted a little remote, thumb over the button. Rick clamped the cutters on the gate, click, then zap. The gate came alive for a second. Rick jerked, dropped the tools, slipped, landed hard in a mud puddle, cursing so loud he probably woke half the neighborhood. Grandpa just took a sip of coffee, muttering trespassing again, like it was a weather report. But here's the best part. Grandpa had already been recording. Every step, every word, every slip and yelp. No drama, just evidence. Rick, in a panic, fumbled for his own phone. Called 911, screaming bloody murder. "He's trying to kill me. He's got a dangerous fence." 5 minutes later, the whole street was glowing red and blue. Officers stepped out, calm but wary. Rick, muddy and wild-eyed, clutched his arm like it was falling off. Grandpa, still in his chair, rocking gently, like nothing unusual was happening. The officer looked at Grandpa, professional but a little tired. "Is there an active electrical device on your gate, sir?" Grandpa nodded, handed him a laminated permit, showed the video, every detail. The officers watched. Quiet. Didn't flinch. Then one said, "So you trespassed?" to Rick. And Rick, mouth open and closing again, tried to explain. "I was inspecting. For the HOA. I had to. At midnight? With bolt cutters?" The law doesn't care about HOA stories at that point. Under state law, it was textbook trespass, vandalism, attempted theft, and, cherry on top, filing a false report. Handcuffs came out. Rick's voice went from angry to desperate to flat-out wild in a heartbeat. "You can't do this. He's dangerous." Nobody answered. By then, people were out in their driveways, watching. And you know what happened? Something amazing. They started clapping. First just a couple hands, then more. A quiet, steady applause for a guy who decided enough was enough. Grandpa nodded at me just once. "Sometimes justice just needs a little electricity," he said. Rick, sweaty and shaking, sat in the back of the cruiser, all that fake authority leaking out of him. The gate he thought he'd control was the one thing that finished him. And as the squad car pulled away, it hit me. This wasn't about a fence. This was about what happens when someone mistakes everyone's patience for permission. When you let small abuses slide long enough, the person doing them starts to believe the rules don't apply to them at all. But here's the real ending. The morning after, the whole block felt lighter. The air changed. People waved a little longer, stood a little taller. No more feeling like someone was watching every move. And I realized this wasn't just a weird suburban saga. It was a lesson about how power works in real life. It's not about a vest or a clipboard or quoting the rules louder than everyone else. It's about legitimacy and respect and, yeah, sometimes about showing receipts to the right people. The law is boring for a reason. HOAs aren't supposed to override your life or deputize random neighbors. The minute someone starts acting like an enforcer with zero paperwork, that's not keeping the peace. That's a problem waiting to happen. And honestly, the psychology is the trickiest part. Guys like Rick don't start out extreme. They push a little, then a little more, and if nobody pushes back, they think that's a green light. Silence isn't kindness. It's just fuel. That's why Grandpa's way worked. He never got emotional, never shouted. He just kept records, followed the law tighter than Rick ever could, and waited for reality to do the rest. This wasn't about revenge. Grandpa didn't want to hurt Rick, just wanted him to stop. The electrified gate was marked, legal, not a trap, just a line that couldn't be ignored. Rick shocked himself because he couldn't recognize a boundary, not on the ground, not in his head. And that's the lesson, isn't it? Sometimes the only thing that stops a bully is a boundary they can't cross. So, if you're dealing with a Rick right now, let me tell you as honestly as I can, like you're my younger brother or sister, and I'm pulling you aside. First, know the rules better than they do. Most people count on you not knowing. Second, document everything. Dates, times, pictures, the whole boring list. Third, don't feed the fire with emotion. Just keep it calm, keep it official. And last, never confuse peace with letting someone walk all over you. Rick thought he was protecting the neighborhood, but all he was really doing was feeding his own ego. And when that ego finally hit the wall of reality, real law, real evidence, real accountability, it didn't stand a chance. So now I want to hear from you. Honestly, have you ever had to deal with an HOA bully? A self-appointed rule enforcer who confused being loud with being right? Did you fight back, let it go, or did it blow up like it did for us? Drop your story below. Read each other's too. You might find out you're not as alone as you think. And, hey, if you stuck with me through this story, thanks. Sometimes the quietest guy on the porch is the one who knows the rules best. And sometimes that's the only power you ever really need.
Cảm ơn tất cả các bạn đã xem video.